you two end up wheel to wheel after the start tomorrow?
Now, can we just already stop about this? Because we had so many questions about this.
Unacceptable. I cannot believe I'm...
When Formula One drivers reach speeds like this, with wrists like this, it's no wonder tempers flare. Moments of high stress, frustration, and even just personalities can clash.
Vous avez fait une belle course sous la pression de Daniel Ricciardo. Oui, c'était pas simple.
Leading to the most disrespectful moments in F1 history. Today, you can join us as we look at flaring tempers, on-track battles, and high-stress situations that have led to the most disrespectful moments in F1 history. Number 1. The Ferrari incident. Now, the first one is not technically an on-track moment, but rather something that happened over the span of a season, the 2019 season to be more specific. While Mercedes was dominating, having won the last 5 constructor titles on the trot, Ferrari had to come up with a plan, and so they did. By 2019, Ferrari was closer to Mercedes, actually winning races. Most notably were Charles Leclerc winning at Spa and Monza. However, the Ferrari was doing incredible speeds, going from the 3rd fastest car on the grid to the fastest. It seriously raised questions about this newfound speed advantage that the Scuderia stumbled upon. Finally, the FIA launched an investigation, and what they found disrespected not only Mercedes, but the entire F1 grid. In its findings, the FIA found that Ferrari had been manipulating fuel flow and oil burning rates. Now, to put this into some perspective, the FIA permits a car to only allow a certain flow of fuel to the engine. This not only manages the speed or performance, but also avoids any safety risks. However, Ferrari threw all this out the door and designed a car that would increase fuel flow rates. Naturally, this led to even more performance. Finally, a verdict was announced and Ferrari was forced to use a lower fuel rate. This meant that 2020 would be one of their worst seasons in decades. At least there was a silver lining, with Ferrari helping the FIA to research new fuels. By 2022, the FIA switched to the newer, safer and environmentally friendly E10 fuels. But not every incident ends with a silver lining. Number 2. Senna takes out Prost, Suzuka 1989. Back in the late 1980s, there was only one dominant car. McLaren had stumbled upon a beautiful design where they would not only win but dominate the season. However, there was no second driver. With Ayrton Senna and Alain Prost driving for McLaren, the Drivers' Championship went down to the wire. With Senna chasing a 16-point deficit, a win at Suzuka was the only thing that would keep him in the championship. Senna did the hard work in qualifying, almost 2 seconds ahead of Prost, but the Frenchman had a better grip, taking the lead into turn 1. Senna ultimately caught up to his teammate, and by the end of the pit stops, Senna was P2, chasing Prost, who's in the lead. The Brazilian took the inside line, heading into the final chicane, but Prost didn't yield, causing both drivers to collide. Despite the damage, Senna entered the pits again. When he came out, Alessandro Nannini was in the lead. Senna overtook him and won the race. However, he never even set foot on the podium. By reinventing the laws, the FIA disqualified Senna, stating that the Brazilian had cut the corner. Senna was ultimately disqualified from the race, leaving Prost with an easy championship win. Number 3. Schumacher gets physical. Spa 1998. Just 9 years later, another ridiculous incident forced the future 7-time world champion to go off the rails. In a close championship battle between McLaren and Ferrari, it would all reach a boiling point as the calendar headed to Spa. Both McLarens locked out the front row, with Michael Schumacher in a distant 4th. However, a downpour on Sunday meant that the Ferrari was the faster car. The FIA determined that the pack would start behind the safety car, but disaster struck just 2 corners into the race. Coulthard lost control and slammed into the wall, leading to an incident with 13 of the 22 drivers. With everyone resetting, a second start took place an hour later. This time, things went well. Unfortunately, a mistake by Häkkinen took him out of the race, and by lap 8, the German was leading. Over the next few laps, he extended his lead to more than 37 seconds. However, he was approaching Coulthard Coulthard again to lap the McLaren driver. With Michael approaching at high speeds and a lot of spray being kicked up, the British driver slowed down. However, Schumacher didn't know this, and a few moments later he smashed into the McLaren. Both drivers retired, but as Schumacher got back to the pits, he was livid. The German took to the McLaren garage, and had it not been for officials, who knows what Michael would have done to David Coulthard. But this is Schumacher's only moment of disrespect. Number 4. Schumacher takes out Villeneuve 1997 European Grand Prix. Just a year earlier, Michael almost copped a criminal charge for his antics on track. Once again, the season was close, with Michael and rival Jacques Villeneuve battling it out for the title. In a similar scene to what happened in 1994 when Michael took out Damon Hill to win his maiden title, the German was once again on the precipice of becoming a champion. There was only one problem, and that was Jacques Villeneuve. Despite Michael leading the race, Villeneuve found some extra pace and was closing in on the Ferrari driver. With 22 laps to go, he launched a dive bomb up the inside of the German. However, Michael simply ignored him and continued turning. Ultimately, Schumacher turned in on the Canadian, forcing both drivers to retire. Now, in normal circumstances, Michael, who was leading the championship, should have been crowned as the winner. However, the FIA determined that Michael purposely broke the rules to prevent his opponent from overtaking him. Schumacher would be disqualified, handing a first and only championship to the Canadian. After getting away with a similar incident in 1994, do you think the FIA did the right thing this time around? Number 5. The best F1 season in history, 2021. If you're talking about F1 feuds, the 2021 scrap between Lewis Hamilton and Max Verstappen can't be ignored. It was billed to be one of the best seasons in Formula 1 history, and it didn't disappoint. The year started like any other. Both drivers exchanged wins, but the Red Bull was certainly the faster car, at least in the hands of Verstappen. The Dutchman took numerous victories, but things reached a boiling point at Silverstone. With the two title protagonists locked in a fight, Hamilton clipped the Red Bull, sending the Dutchman into the barriers at more than 50 Gs. One race later in Hungary, Mercedes' second driver Valtteri Bottas also took out Max, and finally the Dutchman would take out Lewis at Monza. This brought the title closer, and both drivers were fighting for the championship in the closing rounds. It all culminated with Abu Dhabi. Despite Lewis getting a great start and leading the race by more than 20 seconds, the unthinkable happened. A late safety car allowed him to pit for some fresh rubber. With the race supposed to end under the safety car, handing Lewis his 8th title, no one expected what happened next. Race director Michael Massey ordered the race to resume for a single lap. With fresh rubber, the Red Bull easily overtook the Mercedes. Max ultimately won the race and the championship, sparking a ton of controversy. Mercedes even took the FIA to court in a bid to overturn the result. Nowadays, Lewis and Max seem to be on good terms, but fans of each driver continue to bash one another over the incident. Number 6. McLaren pit stop woes in Hungary, 2007. With Lewis Hamilton making his debut for McLaren, tensions were high. However, his teammate won the previous 2 championships, meaning that Alonso was the fastest driver on the grid at the time. The problem is, Lewis was good, and he was posing a real threat to the veteran. Lewis and Alonso collided a couple of times during the season, but all culminated with a pit stop at Hungary. With Lewis not giving Alonso preferential treatment in Q2, the stage was set in Q3 for Alonso to get his revenge. As the track ramped up, McLaren chose to double stack their cars for refueling. They held Alonso for a few seconds, trying to create space on track for the Spaniard to put in his lap. Behind him was Lewis, and with more than 1 minute and 40 seconds left on the clock, it would have been ample time for both drivers to get out and complete a flying lap. Once the lollipop was raised, Alonso didn't move. 2 seconds became 5 and later 10 before the Spaniard set off. Hamilton was visibly frustrated with hand gestures. By the time the Brit got his service in the pits, it was too late. There was no way he would complete a flying lap. Alonso pit pole by 0.017 seconds, ultimately screwing his teammate out of the championship fight. Number 7. Mercedes almost blunders the 2016 season. With the signing of Nico Rosberg, Mercedes had a dream team. Both Rosberg and Hamilton dominated the 2014 and 15 seasons, but when the 2016 season started, there was a new mentality about Rosberg. This time, the German was not going to play second fiddle to Lewis, and he made his intentions clear with a few early victories. However, Spain would be the boiling point. With both drivers locking out the front row, it should have been an easy Mercedes 1-2 when the worst case scenario finally unfolded. Just 3 turns into the race and the 2 Mercedes drivers collided. It's still debatable whose fault it was, but it meant that both Mercs were out. This led to a young Max Verstappen taking his maiden F1 win. But the scrap continued for the rest of the season. Both drivers exchanged wins, and with Rosberg leading the championship in the final round, Lewis had to force Rosberg into third. Lewis backed up the pack, refusing to go faster, but Rosberg relented and defended his second position. Despite Lewis winning the race, Rosberg won the championship, also calling it quits at the same time on his incredible yet short career. Number 8. Multi 21 Seb, Malaysia 2013. The 2010 to 2013 seasons were some of the most interesting the sport had ever seen. Despite Red Bull's dominance, it always came down to the wire for the championship. However, this was another case of teammates both wanting to win the championship. As the season headed to Malaysia, the crack between Mark Webber and Sebastian Vettel finally grew wider. With Red Bull in a commanding position, the team decided to give team orders that would allow Webber to win the race and Vettel to be second. Multi 21 Seb. As everyone now refers to, Vettel chose to ignore team orders and overtook Webber on lap 46. The German would go on to win the race, later also the championship. But things went downhill pretty quickly between the 2 Red Bull drivers. For the rest of the season, there was no cooperation between the 2, ultimately leading to Vettel jumping ship to Ferrari the following season. So, do you think Vettel was wrong in wanting to win this race? Number 9. Verstappen only gives private press conferences. The 2024 season was another year where an unlikely hero came to the forefront. In fact, it was 2 heroes who fought to dethrone the reigning champ. As Red Bull dwindled in performance, it was none other than McLaren who became the fastest car. Unfortunately, it was a little too late, and Lando had an enormous mountain to climb in taking points off Verstappen. However, the McLaren came into its own in Hungary, with Lando and Piastri taking a dominant win after Max and Lewis once again collided. With tensions brewing heading into Azerbaijan, the Dutchman was ready to speak his mind. After a poor showing in Baku, reporters asked Max about his car's performance in the previous race. Max had a few choice words that would later come to haunt him. He was called out by the FIA for swearing, which ultimately led to a fine and community service as punishment. But things didn't end here. Just a session later, Max was once again in the press room. He had to do the press conference after qualifying, which Max had no intention of doing. Despite being seated in the room, the Dutchman blatantly refused to answer any questions. Instead, he opted for short one-word answers. More surprising is the fact that he offered reporters a free press conference after the real one. Max simply stepped outside, where he would answer all the questions the public had. This blatant boycott of the FIA was unprecedented and something no driver had ever done before. Well, aside from Kimi Raikkonen, who had no problem finding excuses not to attend anyway. But heated moments are nothing new, and when you compete at such an elite level, the stress and tension eventually get to you. So, do you think these drivers' actions can be excused, or should more rules be put in place to avoid tempers flaring? Let us know in the comments down below.